Breaking news, France is falling. For decades it lived off Africa's resources and power. But now, that empire is crumbling before our eyes. In just months, 14 African countries have kicked France out. Niger, Burkina Faso, Mali and Chad were the first to end military deals and chase out French troops. Then Ivory Coast and Senegal followed, closing French bases, sending soldiers home and cutting ties. Chad has ripped up its defense pact. Ivory Coast is removing 600 French soldiers, and Senegal will close its last French base before the end of 2025. This is more than troops leaving, it's France's lifeline snapping. For years, Paris depended on Africa for minerals, for military power, for survival. Without Africa, France is collapsing under its own weight, its economy sinking, its influence gone. What we are witnessing is history. Africa rising, France falling. The world will never be the same again.
You said Eastern Europe is the new Africa? Let's talk about that. Because it's not just a joke, it's actually the truth. Corporations have extracted everything they could from Africa. Land, minerals, labor. But now Africa is pushing back. Countries are nationalizing resources. Leaders are kicking out Western military and corporate influence. So where do they go next? Eastern Europe. Cheap land, desperate governments, weak regulation, and a population trained to stay quiet and be European. For what? Sounds familiar? Western corporations now own the water, the farmland, the banks, the supermarkets, the energy, even the fucking air rights in some regions. This is what colonization looks like in 2025. No flags, no troops, just contracts, lobbyists, and debt. So yeah, Eastern Europe is the new Africa. Not because of skin color, but because of economic status, political obedience, and resource extraction. The question is, will the people wake up before there's nothing left to reclaim?
Guys, France is in such a mess. I'm telling you, France is literally collapsing. So the Prime Minister, who has barely been in his position for close to a month, has now resigned because they're completely ungovernable, because not a single person can agree, because the country is in such a critical crisis. Ever since the countries of the western part of Africa withdrew the French forces and the French from the countries, France has spiraled out of control. They are ungovernable. They're calling for Emmanuel Macron to go as well, but they will not find a solution, because the solution is they've got nobody to continue milking, because the Africans have literally kicked them out. And guys, people in Africa, this should be a roadmap of African countries, because you have seen the power of Africa. Africa basically is what feeds the colonial powers. And the moment you turn that tap off, they start to decline. They spiral so badly. Now France is ungovernable because they have so many strikes. People are protesting every single week. They are protesting because they cannot make ends meet, and the politicians still refuse to tell the actual French people that the problem stems from Africans kicking them out.
Africa gives aid to Europe. Most people don't know that. I'll prove this to you. If we look at European resources, what do we have? Do we have copper, oil, uranium, gold, right? All these things. Fruits, do we have these things? Just down there we have supermarkets. Where's the fruit from? Okay, now, if right now Africa stops giving aid to Europe, says, you're not taking our bananas, our fruits, our oil, our gas, you're not taking any of this. Fine. Europe, your chicken is worth our chicken. Your beef is worth our beef. Okay? One for one like. No currencies involved. What will Europe trade on? What does the UK have? Apples, potatoes? What do they have? Africa has the resources, and that aid is coming to the UK. That aid is coming to Europe. So the thing is...
No, it's interesting, you would classify that as aid.
It is aid. What else is it?
I won't disagree with you in regards to all those things. I already know that, and I agree with you there. But I like the way you used it as you put it under the banner of aid.
I didn't. This is what black academics who are working on this.
The actual quote: "Without Africa, France will have no history in the 21st century," was actually said by Francois Mitterrand in 1957. So those people that keep saying it's Jacques Chirac, it wasn't Jacques Chirac that said it. It was the guy before Jacques Chirac, Francois Mitterrand. He said it. Without Africa, France has no history. They're in the 21st century, which is where we are. We're basically saying they're going to go back to the third world. As you can see, anger over budget cuts. They're cutting budget because, and they're increasing taxes because Africa has cut them off. Their main source of income is gone. So now the retirement, look it up. They're going into their retirement. They have no money. France is the second largest economy in Europe, right? Okay. Right now, ask yourself, French people, what has France used to prop up its economy this whole time? What has France used to build the Champs-Élysées and all the... Africa said no. And remember, the French, what was it? There was a French general that made this video, said this. I'll find the video and I'll send it to you, and I'll make a video about it. He said, if they don't do shit right, within one generation, French people will be going to Africa as immigrants to look for work. It starts now.
The most dangerous situation is in Africa, because of course Africa is absolutely the most important continent on the planet. The most important continent to the planet. And the next most important, and therefore the next most at-risk region, is the Middle East. The Middle East and Africa power the whole global economy. They power everything that makes so-called modern life possible. It's all made possible by the Middle East and Africa. And if the West was an actually civilized civilization, that would mean that peace and stability in the Middle East and in Africa should be of paramount importance. Good relations and harmonious dealings and so on, that would be the priority if they were civilized people. But of course the West is not civilized. And if you have something that they need, if you have something that they want, then they do not see you as a friend. They don't see you as a friend that they want to be close to and have good relations with. They see you as an enemy that they want to subjugate. They see the world in a predator-prey paradigm.
So apparently, France's government is on the brink of collapsing. And y'all know why? Because this has been going on over 50 years. Africa has been sending France 80% of their revenue. Yes, they was in a deal with France, and 80% of the revenue the country made was to go to France. And that's what's been supporting France. France cannot support itself. Africa has been supporting France. And Africa is at the point, so they said, we're not giving you shit else. We're not giving you no more money. And guess what? France is collapsing. They have no money for nothing. I really feel like colonization has come to a head. Like all that shit they've been doing, all the mistreatment and the stealing and the unfairness, it's just coming to a head. So you tell me for over 50 years, Africa has been supporting France, and Africa is poor as shit. Like they don't have nothing for themselves. They should be the richest country in the world because they got so many resources. They go to Africa, they steal their resources, they steal their money. Good for Africa.
Man, the African nations have shut France down. They didn't think that all this protesting and rioting would lead into Paris. Well, it led into Paris. The French people have this day, this protest day, where it's called Block Everything. And these people are blocking everything from highways to freeways. Nothing is moving. Everything is shut down. The French government, they don't even want to give these people their pensions. They taking their holidays away from them. This is just how broke they are. They aren't able to pay anything. Not only that, the African nations have kicked the French military out of Africa. So the military don't even have no place to be. So there are no more French men in the military in Africa. They're using their own military, their own people. But France is going through it. They did not think this was going to spill over into Paris, but it has. Things are on fire. They are writing all on those beautiful statues. It is a hot ass mess over there. And Africa, they don't give a shit.
France is in shithole right now. Guys, listen to this.
Because African countries have kicked them out and they don't allow them to exploit them anymore. And as you saw, there's a big rally in the country. They're protesting the President Macron. They want him out.
Do you hear that?
Yesterday, they voted out the Prime Minister, which was the third Prime Minister in 14 months. He got a vote of no confidence, the same last three, because the last three Prime Ministers cannot present a bill or cannot present a plan on how to revitalize the French economy. Now, the only way to present a plan to revitalize the French economy is by re-enslaving or re-exploiting African countries. And Russia is helping African countries. Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, they're building nuclear plants. Like, it's helping African countries. That's Russia's plan of fucking up the West. So the West is using a proxy war to destroy Russia. Russia has decided, okay, I'm going to take away your means of living. So Russia has been saving African countries from France, and they have a planned demonstration tomorrow, the 10th. Wednesday, the whole nation is going to have this massive demonstration tomorrow in protest of Macron.
Did you hear that? France is gone.
Yeah, France is broke, and everything they're doing right now, a lot of the French understand it, but majority of the masses don't. Everything they're doing right now, nothing can be done. The only way France goes back to where it used to be is to find new countries to exploit for resources. That's it. France has nothing. They have nothing.
Did you hear that?
So France is broke because African countries.
France is broke. France is collapsed. France can never stand no more. It is over.
The French Prime Minister is warning the country to take drastic measures before the entire economy collapses. The crisis that is in France is way worse than a lot of people expect. It might seem like an exaggeration, but if you give it a closer look, you will find out that France is mathematically headed into a bankruptcy. And if France is not going to change its policies today, France is over. If you think that I'm exaggerating, let me explain. Over the last 25 years, France has accumulated so much debt that most people cannot possibly imagine. And compared to France, the US debt crisis doesn't seem like a big problem. You see, in 2008, when the global economy has collapsed, the French economy was overexposed to the United States and the global economy, which led many financial institutions in France to go bankrupt, which forced the government to intervene and borrow as much money as possible to save the economy. That's when the French debt to GDP ratio has almost doubled in a couple of years. It is normal for countries to borrow money when there is a crisis, but when you're out of crisis, you're supposed to pay off that debt. But here is the trap that the French government fell into. You see, after 2010, bond rates all across the globe has went down dramatically. So borrowing money between 2010 and 2021 was dramatically lower than ever in the history. You could borrow money at 1% interest rate. So French politicians started massively borrowing money, and you can clearly see that if you compare debt to GDP ratio of France. Since 2010, that number kept growing. And then in 2020, a crisis happens which forces the government to yet again borrow as much money as possible to save the French government. You're forcing people to stay in their homes, so you gotta pay them something so that they don't starve to death in their houses. So the debt to GDP ratio almost reaches 120%. France since then has slightly paid off some of its debts, but it's still very high at 114%. When there is a crisis and you borrow that money at such a low interest rate, the crisis is over, maybe it's time for you to pay that debt off. And if you don't do that and the time to pay off the debt comes, what are you going to do? You will refinance that debt. But interest rates now are higher than they were back in the days when you borrowed the money. So you will have to refinance it at a much higher interest rate. Imagine if you go and borrow $1 million at 1% interest rate, which is not a lot of money. By paying $10,000 annually, you can manage your debt. Suddenly, 5 years later, you have spent $1 million, and now it's time to pay off your debt. You would go and borrow money, but this time you will borrow that money at 3.5% interest rate. So your interest payment suddenly went from $10,000 to $35,000, which makes it much more difficult to sustain that debt. And that is the problem that the French government has found itself, because now the rates on 10-year government bonds in France have reached 3.5%, and they're very unlikely to go down anytime soon.